Siddaramaiah, his wife Parvathi and his brother-in-law, the Chief Minister's wife has now made a dramatic new offer. She has offered to return all the properties. She's written a letter, in fact, to the Lokayukta saying that she's willing to return all the properties that were given by Muda, the Mysuru Urban Development Authority, in exchange for the agricultural land that was gifted to her by her brother. But the question is, why now? Why is she reacting in this 11th hour, making this offer almost post facto after the High Court cleared an investigation, after the governor gave the sanction to prosecute, and of course now a Lokayukta investigation has begun, and now an ED investigation has also begun. And to the Enforcement Directorate, this is what the Congress and its supporters are arguing. What is the role of the Enforcement Directorate here? Because after all, the ED can only step in if there is a case prima facie made out of money laundering. Where is that money laundering case is the question they're asking. Or is this simply another political attempt, a witch hunt, after what we've seen with Kejriwal and Hemant Soren and Sisodia? Find an opposition leader, jail him or her, keep them incarcerated for a few months, let the matter go all the way up to the Supreme Court, by which time you have tarnished their reputation. So after Operation Kejriwal, Operation Hemant Soren is the next opposition chief minister who is under the ED radar, Siddaramaiah in Karnataka. But first, the story so far.
ಮನಿ ಲ್ಯಾಂಡ್ರಿಂಗ್ ಹೆಂಗಾಗ್ತದೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ವಾಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಮೈ ರೋಲ್ ದೇರ್ ಇಸ್ ನೋ ರೋಲ್ ಆಫ್ ಮೀ.
The decision of giving back or surrendering sites, that itself is an admission of guilt by Chief Minister Siddaramaiah.
All right, let's open this up to our guests. We'll be joined in a moment by Sanju Verma, national spokesperson of the BJP, Lavanya Ballal is spokesperson of the Congress Party, Brijesh Karlappa, senior advocate at the Supreme Court, and Aman Sinha, senior advocate at the Supreme Court, will also be joining us. I'll also be joined through the course of the discussion by TJ Abraham, who's the original complainant in this case. Let me ask Lavanya Ballal this. Yes, the Chief Minister's wife has now written to the Lokayukta saying that Muda had given 3.16 acres, or at least had used 3.16 acres of agricultural land, in lieu of which she was granted compensatory land. She was given 14 plots in Vijayanagar. She now says she wishes to return these 14 plots and cancel the sale deeds. The question, Lavanya, is why now? Why is the Chief Minister's wife making this offer now, post facto, after the ED has also filed a case? And more importantly, by returning these plots, or at least offering to do so, isn't that an admission of guilt?
Good evening, Zaka. You raised a very valid question at the beginning of this debate. You said, where is the money laundering? That is a very valid question, because at this point of time, no one is claiming that there has money, the money has changed hands. Only when money has changed hands can someone be accused of money laundering. The 50-50 scheme was approved by the BJP, and she was one among the hundreds of allottees who got sites like this. At this point of time, yes, I agree. Why is she wishing to return the sites at the nth moment? Maybe she could have done it much earlier and it would have been better optics.
All right, that line with Lavanya, I think, seems to have been frozen. We'll try again if we can see if the line can be unfrozen and see and try and understand what she's trying. Yeah, okay, go ahead. Yeah, I believe I can hear you.
Yeah. All I'm saying is,
All right, that's a bad connection. We'll try and fix that with Lavanya Ballal in just 1 second. But Brijesh Karlappa, the moot point is this. If the Chief Minister had no role in this, if the Chief Minister's wife felt that she should not be the beneficiary of any kind of undue advantage of her husband's position in public office, then this offer of returning the plots should have come on day one. These complaints were registered with the governor more than 3 months ago. Why didn't the chief minister or his wife make this offer then? And by doing so now at the 11th hour, after the ED has registered a case in ECIR, isn't that, and this is what the BJP is arguing, isn't that de facto almost an admission of guilt?
See, Zaka, as far as the return of sites is concerned, I would have preferred if the return of sites had been done on day one. And honestly, to my mind, and I've seen the entirety of the transaction, the chief minister or his wife have committed no illegality. This is not, an offer, 50-50 offer or an allotment of sites in a different locality is not endemic only to the chief minister and his wife. It has been given to 700 other people. So I think the first thing is that this is a purely political case. And, the fact is that the BJP has, very poor leadership here, and they don't have a face to counter Mr. Siddaramaiah. Therefore, they've made use of the governor, and they're doing it across the country. So this is one of those stories, and the less said about the merits of the case, the better, because even the judge, even while in his 200-page judgment, he only says that there is suspicion and so on and so forth. Can you convict a person on suspicion? Right? And he says
but Brijesh, what is the rational explanation? If you can explain, just hear me out, 10 seconds. Please explain to our viewers, there's a 3.16 acre plot, agricultural land on the outskirts of Mysuru, right? It's valued about 3.5-4 crores. In lieu of that, she gets 14 properties, 14 plots, right in the heart of the city in an upscale locality called Vijayanagara. Now, the valuation of that could be 50 crores, 60 crores, whatever it is. Please explain how one is equivalent to the other.
See, Zaka, you'll have to see what the Land Acquisition Act of 2013 says. And the Land Acquisition Act of 2013 says that any land loser has to get 2.5 times the value of his land, right? So, and this is where everything begins.
Okay.
Once Land Acquisition Act 2013 has come, and I'm sorry the Chief Minister's people didn't argue all this in court. I wish they had done a better job of arguing these matters. But anyway, I'm not anybody to advise them. The point is that today the land loser is king. When any...
All right, Sanju Verma is also joining us and Aman Sinha is also joining us. Sanju Verma, the question is, what is the need for... There are two parts to this question. One is the political part, the other is the legal part. The legal part first. The Congress and the other opposition is saying by bringing in the Enforcement Directorate post facto after the High Court has given the go-ahead to the Lokayukta. The Lokayukta has already filed a case in this. The ED can only come when prima facie a case of money laundering is made out. Where is the money laundering? The 14 plots that have been given to the Chief Minister's wife are still plots. Those plots have not been sold to anybody. No money has been accrued by the sale of those plots. So where is the money laundering here?
You know, Zaka, nice to be back on your show after quite a bit. I just have to make a couple of points here. First, the legal one, why the ED has stepped in. Let me be very clear that the Enforcement Directorate has the powers of a civil court since 2003. When it was set up, it was only an advisory body, but that's no longer the case. And the second point about where is the money laundering angle? You know, the money laundering angle is simply this, as you rightly said, that after having been compensated and after having been given 3.16 acres worth of property in South Mysuru, including Vijayanagar, the fact of the matter is that while this 3.16 acre was valued at anywhere between 3.5 to 4.5 crore odd, if you read the fine print, the actual money that was used by the Siddaramaiah couple to acquire this property was barely in the region of 30 to 40 lakh rupees, which is minuscule. Point number two. Point number three, I think the most important point which nobody seems to be mentioning is, let us call out the bluff of Siddaramaiah. Accused number one in the Muda scam is Siddaramaiah. Accused number two in the Muda scam is Siddaramaiah's wife BM Parvathi. Accused number 3 in the Muda scam is Siddaramaiah's brother-in-law Mallikarjun. The most important point is this. If you look at the Money Laundering Act, Section 45 or even Section 19 pertaining to arrest, Section 51, which makes it non-bailable and non-cognizable, the Money Laundering Act clearly says that the Enforcement Directorate suo moto has the powers to interrogate and summon anyone it deems fit pertaining to a given case, even if that concerned person is not directly or indirectly linked to the case. This has been well established in the Vijay Madan Lal Chaudhary versus Union of India case, which is supposed to be a benchmark case when dealing with money laundering cases. The most important point is only this. Sometimes we get into the fine print and we lose sight of the larger plot. We lose sight of the woods for the trees.
Okay.
Your audience needs to simply know this. When was the land denotified? This particular land, which was eventually given to Siddaramaiah's wife, it was when Siddaramaiah was the Deputy Chief Minister. When were the draft notifications for land acquisition changed? This also happened when Siddaramaiah was the Deputy Chief Minister. And when was this large parcel of prime property in South Mysuru given to BM Parvathi? It was when her own son, Siddaramaiah, and her son, they were BM Parvathi's son. He was the number 2 in the Mysuru Urban Development Authority. Tell me if this is not a classic case of conflict of interest, if this is not a classic case of nepotism,
no,
if this is not a classic
I just
case
want
of
to
corruption,
underline
what
that in December 2017, when Muda made the decision to award the alternative sites to Parvathi, the Congress party was not in power, it was a BJP government. In January of 2022, when Ms. Parvathi got these 14 plots in Vijayanagara third phase, again, it was a BJP government, not a Congress government. But be that as it may, there is a whole chronology that goes all the way back to 2004. 1 second, ma'am, please. Aman Sinha now. Aman Sinha, the point is, now the political point, which Congress has been making, Aam Aadmi Party has been making, other parties have been making. ED is being used as an instrument of the state. We've seen in Kejriwal's case, Sisodia's case, Hemant Soren's case, you're simply using ED as an instrument to vilify opposition leaders. Matter drags on in the court for a few months. And look at the observations that the Supreme Court made while giving bail to Kejriwal and Hemant Soren, that ultimately the rights of the individual, the liberties of the individual will trump any Section 45 of PMLA.
Zaka, good evening. First of all, let me tell you that the objective of the PMLA Act is very clear. Wherever there are illicit gains of financial nature and there are proceeds of crime emanating from that, then ED and PMLA Act is absolutely correctly applied, and ED is fully expected to come in and enforce and implement the law. There cannot be a different set of laws for a certain set of offenders and another set of laws for somebody else. The mandate of law is very clear. Even in this case, Zaka, there are serious allegations of money laundering, fraud against the sitting CM, and it's a very clear case where 14 valuable land plots are allotted in lieu of one particular piece of land which was not developed. Now, clearly, there are illicit gains of humongous proportions, and it is a classic case for Enforcement Directorate to step in and implement the mandate of the law, which is absolutely clear by letter of law under the Prevention of Money Laundering
But
Act.
Amanji, can I just ask one small intervention? Please explain to our viewers, clarify to our viewers, when you say proceeds of crime, which means an illegal act, a criminal act has happened, and thereby somebody has benefited by that criminal act. That money
Zaka,
trail has to necessarily change from person A to person B's hands. How has that happened in this case?
Zaka, I lost your voice in between the major crux of your question. Can you just repeat?
Yeah, I'm just going to repeat that. So when you say proceeds of crime, which means a criminal act has happened, allegedly, and the beneficiaries of that criminal act, there is a change of money between hands of one person to the hands of another person. Can you explain to our viewers in this case, how has that money transferred from person A to person B? Because the plots have not been sold. If the plots have not been sold, no money has been accrued.
No, that may not be a correct assumption, Zaka, for the simple reason that wherever there are illegitimate financial gains, and certainly there is money laundering involved, and agencies are expected to come in and implement the law. Now, very clearly, if in lieu of undeveloped land, if 14 valuable plots are being given, it is humongous, illegitimate, illicit financial gains, especially when the concerned party and their family members have been in seat of power in that particular state for a long tenure of time. And this is all subject matter of investigation, Zaka. All the final details that you are intending to know would be clear only once it is thoroughly investigated.
Let me bring in the complainant. Let me bring in the complainant. It's basis his complaint that the governor gave the sanction to prosecute. The High Court upheld the governor's decision. Mr. T.J. Abraham is the original complainant in this case. Mr. Abraham, thank you very much for speaking with us today. The Chief Minister, the Congress party, came out with a defense saying, where is the question of money laundering? Why is the ED being brought into this case? Because there's no money laundering, no property has been sold, and therefore monies have not been realized. The Chief Minister's wife has also written a letter very dramatically to the Lokayukta offering to return the properties concerned so that the Muda takes back her properties and the case be dropped. How would you respond as the original petitioner, the original complainant in this case, Mr. Abraham?
See, whether money laundering is there or not is a different question. Whether, irrespective of you returning the site, the crime committed will not be washed away just because you return the site. The crime has to be investigated, and the crime will continue to be investigated. And the punishment that is required to be given to the offender, the accused, will surely be dealt with by the court.
Mr. Abraham, the other contention that's also been made is twofold. One, that Mr. Siddaramaiah or his wife are not the only political family that have benefited by this 50-50 scheme. Other politicians too have benefited. In fact, even other people, normal people have been beneficiaries of this 50-50 scheme. I believe over 100 people have been beneficiaries. Number two, they're also saying that when this land was allotted, the BJP government was in power. Mr. Siddaramaiah was not in an official position. So where does the question of PCA or the prevention of corruption come into question? Because he was not holding any official position at that time. How would you respond to that?
What they're trying to say is D.T. Jayakumar, Devegowda, then Kumar Swamy. All these people have got sites in Muda, allotted by Muda. This is what their allegation is. From what I know, those are irregularities. A person who was eligible to get a site which is 30-40 may have got 60-40, or a person who was supposed to get it in A layout would have got it in a premium layout, B layout. These are irregularities, I would say. But this, the crime committed by the alleged crime committed by the CM's family comes under the category of illegality. Well, how do you have no right to seek any compensation at all. You have no right to seek compensation, but you've sought for compensation and you have got the compensation.
Can you explain that to our viewers? How is it in one instance it's an irregularity, as you say, and in the other instance it is an illegality? Can you explain the difference, particularly in this case? Why was the Chief Minister's wife not entitled to this compensation, whereas others were?
See, you are not eligible to get compensation. You are not eligible at all. Zero eligibility to get compensation. Yet you got 14 sites. There, the other cases, they are eligible to get sites, but they've got bigger sites or sites in places where it is of more value.
Okay.
But in this case, CM's case, the CM's wife was not at all eligible to even seek 1 square feet of alternative site.
Lavanya Balal, you heard Mr. T.J. Abraham, the original complainant. The CM's wife was not entitled to get even 1 square foot of compensatory land or plot, but she got. The issue is the illegality, not the irregularity.
It's pretty rich, for him to be forgiving of other political leaders claiming that it is irregularities. Irregularities are not viewed as irregularities by the law, first of all. And second, it is ridiculous for someone to claim that Parvathi had no right to seek compensation for the land which was acquired. And when people talk about how CM Siddaramaiah was the deputy CM when the property was denotified. They failed to say Kumaraswamy, who is also under investigation by the Lokayukta from almost a decade. Right? There is an investigation going on about him, about the Ganganagar land scam. There is no ED that is being used against Kumaraswamy at all. It doesn't come into play. It comes only into play when the opposition leaders or anybody who is not towing the line of the BJP, that is when the ED comes into play. Just today we saw what happened with Pranay Roy and his wife and how the conviction rate of ED is extremely low. When people talk about, hey, you know what, she shouldn't have gotten the site at all, I do not think they are applying any legalities there. Now the question of why she is returning the property, yes, optics wise she could have returned it much earlier, but you have to understand, as a person, she's been an extremely simple, very private person, and she does not want any of that to affect her husband's career, untarnished career, which the BJP is trying its level best.
No, so the BJP is trying its level best. Sanju Verma, please respond to the charge by the Congress that, look, at the end of the day, there is no money laundering because monies have not been realized. This is the same thing that you said to Kejriwal as well. Where is the money? Who benefited from that money? In this case, again, you have to show the money trail. There is no evidence of the money trail yet because the plots are intact. The plots have not been sold. Monies have not been accrued. And more importantly, this whole question, and you need to answer this, December 2017, when Muda decides to award the alternative sites, BJP is in power. January 2022, when the CM's wife gets these 14 plots in Vijayanagar third phase, the BJP is in power.
You know, Zaka, you've asked me pertinent questions, and please bear with me. I will not hesitate to speak the uncomfortable truth. What I fail to understand, Zaka, and this is with no offense to you, you are a very seasoned journalist. You keep reinforcing in your debate, you know, when 2021, you know, the properties were finally transferred to BM Parvathi, BJP was in power. When X happened, BJP was in power. What your audience needs to know, and with no offense to you, Zaka, you also need to mention this, the hard fact number one. In 2005, when this parcel of land was transferred to Siddaramaiah's brother-in-law, Mallikarjun, who's basically BM Parvathi's brother, who was in power in the center? It was the Congress-led UPA. When Siddaramaiah in 2009-10 forged documents, who was in power in the center? It was the Congress party. When Siddaramaiah filed a false affidavit in 2013, who was in power in the center? It was the Congress party. But most importantly, this. Under the SC/ST provisions of 1952, 1956, 1958, you do not need to realize sale of property. The property need not actually accrue to you. Even if it has been simply transferred to you, even if it has been simply gifted to you, which is what happened. First, the parcel of land was transferred to Mallikarjun, the brother-in-law of Siddaramaiah. Then Mallikarjun gifted this land to his sister BM Parvathi. That is ground enough to slap money laundering charges was wide section 7, 14, 19, 45, 51 of the PMLA, but also the fact that this parcel of land originally belonged to Dalits, and without compensating the Dalit community fair and square, this land was illegally and flouting every rule in the rule book. There was a large element of irregularity as well. It was
Lavanya will to respond and then Kallappa. Yeah, Brijesh. Yeah,
a quick rebuttal and a correction of information. The land which belonged to the Dalit family was auctioned and someone else purchased it. And after the purchase, Mr. Malika, the brother-in-law of CM Siddaramaiah, purchased it. So there is something else that has happened in between the Dalit owners. There was one more owner, and then it came to the hands of
That's a rapid lie.
Brother. So let's
give me the auction details. Give me the auction details. There was no auction that happened.
I'm so sorry, I didn't
lie on national TV.
Okay, one at a time, please. One at a time. Yeah, one at a time. Yeah.
There was no auction that happened.
One at a time, please. One at a time, please. Lavanya.
The ED is being used by the BJP for political vendetta. That's all we would like to say.
Okay, Brijesh Kallappa, the point. No, one second, Brijesh Kallappa. The point is that the Chief Minister, in as recently as July of 2024, sought compensation of 62 crore for the land. Now, you may argue that the plots have not been sold and monies have not been accrued. if the Chief Minister or his wife had no intention of using these plots, and as the wife has now written a letter to the Lokayukta to return those plots, why did the Chief Minister seek a compensation of 62 crores for that land?
Zaka, I would not have advised the Chief Minister to publicly ask for that amount of money. I think he had been ill-advised to ask for that amount of money. But I think there is a legitimacy in his demand, because like I was trying to explain to you earlier, there is the Land Acquisition Act of 2013, under the terms of which the value of the land has to be, when you lose land, it has to be returned to you 2.5 times as a means of compensation. So that is what I was trying to explain to you, and that is perhaps why he has made that statement. Anyway, I would not have expected him, if I were with him, I would not have advised him.
And to the BJP's allegation that the land acquisition was amended when Siddaramaiah was Chief Minister, what do you say to that?
No, land acquisition is a central act. Land Acquisition Act of 2013 is a central act, and I think only somebody with absolutely no brain can suggest that, Mr. Siddaramaiah brought the act in order to help.
So are you brainless? Are you brainless?
Okay, Sanju Verma, without any personal attacks, please, let's...
No, I mean, if he is using strong terms like somebody without a brain, so by that logic, are you brainless? Because this is actually a state act. No, let me finish.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was Sanju Verma.
The Land Acquisition and Rehabilitation Act is a particular act specific only to Karnataka. Zaka, can I finish? Because he made a very reckless allegation. I need to rebut in 30 seconds. The Land Acquisition and Rehabilitation Act, which we are talking about, which pertains to the Muda scam, is a state act. This is not a central government act, and I'll tell you what, Zaka, which nobody seems to be talking about.
Act, madam.
Can I now finish? The denotification happened when Siddaramaiah was either the CM or deputy CM. The draft notification rules were changed when Siddaramaiah was the deputy CM. Now, hang on. It was earlier a 60-40 scheme, Zaka. It was earlier a 60-40 scheme. It was changed to a 50-50 scheme when Siddaramaiah was the Chief Minister and the land use was changed.
I'm sorry, Zaka, that is incorrect.
Okay, I have to wrap up. 30 seconds, Brijesh, because your name was brought up. Yeah.
See, I'm sorry,
30 seconds. I got to wrap up.
Any personal statement against Sanju Verma, but I'd only like to say this, that see, the law is the same as far as the rest of the country is concerned. So whether it is Meerut or whether it is some place in Haryana, they're all facing problems because of land acquisition. And the new act has 50-50 scheme throughout the country. So I think if somebody is saying 60-40 and all that,
all right, I got to wrap up. Thank you very much. I got to wrap up. Thank you very much to all our guests. But we'll see how this story plays out, not just for Siddaramaiah. He's, of course, digging his heels in. The Congress Party, the High Command of the Congress Party, the state leadership, the CLP there in the state, all seem to be backing him for the moment. The question, though, is what about the optics? What about the morality here? The fact that the Chief Minister's wife has written a letter almost post facto after the ED has filed an ECIR. In the eyes of the public, ultimately, as they say in politics, Caesar's wife has to be above board. Will that be applicable in this case, or will that be seen in this case? Because Mr. Siddaramaiah certainly does have a lot to answer for in the eyes of the public and, of course, in the eyes of a court of law. Let's now shift focus to the other big story. The Israeli military has announced the start of a limited and a localized operation targeting Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. These include ground raids in villages that are close to the northern border with Israel. Israeli troops have crossed the border after a prolonged bombing campaign over the last couple of weeks, which have killed 7 of the top Hezbollah commanders, including the leader of that group, Hassan Nasrallah, escalating tensions in the Middle East. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel has criticized the Iranian government for its support for Hezbollah while at the same time neglecting its own people. Here's a deep dive into what the Israeli game plan is.
The Israel Defense Forces is conducting limited and targeted raids along Israel's northern border against the threat Hezbollah poses to civilians in northern Israel. These localized ground raids will target Hezbollah strongholds that threaten Israeli towns, kibbutzim, and communities along our border.
The Israeli military announced early Tuesday morning that its troops had begun crossing into southern Lebanon. This is the first time that the Israeli army is going into a ground invasion of Lebanon since 2006. And it comes just 3 days after the killing of Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah in an Israeli airstrike in Beirut. The IDF issued a statement saying that they would destroy Hezbollah military infrastructure in villages close to the Israel-Lebanon border. In a statement that was issued shortly before 2 a.m., the military described the operation as a limited one. The IDF said that its troops had begun entering Lebanon a few hours ago in order to target sites that pose an immediate threat to Israeli communities in northern Israel. The invasion followed intense Israeli strikes across Lebanon over the past 2 weeks that have killed hundreds of people. According to the Lebanese Health Ministry, more than 1,000 Lebanese nationals have been killed. They do not distinguish between civilians and Hezbollah militants, counting all of them as Lebanese citizens. It started with the pager attacks in Beirut 2 weeks ago, in which a number of Hezbollah commanders were targeted. And it culminated last week with the killing of the leader of this terror group, Hassan Nasrallah. With this ground invasion, Israel is trying to force a conclusion to this war with Hezbollah, which started almost in parallel with Israel's war with Hamas in Gaza. The Gaza war is now closing in on its first-year anniversary. It was set off by the October 7th terror attacks on southern Israel last year, in which over 1,000 Israelis were killed and over 240 taken hostage. More than 100 of them are still in Hamas captivity. And right from the opening days of this war, Hezbollah started firing towards Israel and its positions in northern Israel in solidarity with Hamas. Both Hamas and Hezbollah are backed by Iran. 3 Israeli officials said that the invasion plan involved operating in a narrow strip of land that lines the northern side of the border between Israel and Lebanon. The last time Israel invaded Lebanon, it managed to push Hezbollah back north of the Litani River. That war ended with a UN-brokered ceasefire, which included Resolution 1701, which said that Hezbollah would vacate the land between the river and the northern Israeli border. The current invasion force consisted of small groups of commandos who were accompanied by air cover as well as artillery shells that are being fired from Israel. While for the time being it is intended to keep it as a limited operation, the plan could yet evolve into a much larger invasion. Thousands of additional troops have been deployed in northern Israel just in the last few days, and that has led to speculation about a broader, more prolonged operation. The invasion plan was approved in a late-night cabinet meeting shortly after the Israeli military declared a closed military zone in 3 villages which are at the northern tip of Israel. These include the villages from where thousands of Israeli civilians have had to flee in the past year since the war in Gaza began. The properties here have been badly damaged through a year of shelling and rocket fire from Hezbollah based in Lebanon. Earlier in that day, on Tuesday, a reporter for the New York Times saw at least 24 military Humvees, or armored personnel carriers, heading towards the same area. They were carrying troops who were in full combat gear. They even had night vision goggles with them. Dozens of logistical trucks, some of them armored trucks, were also headed to that same direction in the north. Intense explosions could also be heard close to the border late Monday, according to at least 2 of the residents who had not evacuated the area. The invasion plan followed days of smaller and brief cross-border reconnaissance missions in which Israeli commandos prepared for the larger incursion. Israel's official war aim is to make northern Israel safe enough for the return of tens of thousands who've been displaced to return home after nearly a year of rocket fire from Lebanon. According to the Israeli government, there are about 60,000 northern Israelis who have been displaced from their homes since the war between Israel and Hamas began. Hundreds of thousands of Lebanese civilians have also been displaced by Israeli fire, and more than 1,000 people, both civilians and combatants, have been killed by the Israeli airstrikes. And this limited ground operation is already having its impact far and wide, much further away from both Israel and Lebanon. More American forces are being rushed to the region. President Joe Biden of the United States says that he's sending a few thousand more troops to the Middle East, and this has been confirmed by the Pentagon Monday. Defense Department officials say the additional forces would bolster the security that is required for the 40,000 American troops who are already in the region, and they will help with the defense of Israel.
Can an all-out war in the Middle East be avoided? It has to be. We really have to avoid it. We've already taken precautions relative to our embassies and personnel who want to leave, but We're not there yet, but we're working like hell with the French and many others. Consider good work.
America is also sending additional fighter jets and ships to the already volatile region. But both the movement of personnel as well as the warships and the additional fighter jets is a signal to Tehran not to escalate matters further. Just ahead of the invasion, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released an English-language video aimed at the Iranian public. In that video, he's heard saying, and I quote, "The people of Iran should know Israel stands with you." He also reiterated his threats against the Iranian government, saying, and again I quote, "There is nowhere that we will not go to protect our people and protect our country," unquote. This was, of course, seen as a veiled threat that if it came down to it, then Israel would not mind opening a direct line of attack against Tehran. Never mind the logistical and diplomatic difficulties involved in covering the over 2,000 kilometers that separate Tel Aviv and Tehran. Israel has used covert operations in the past to target Iranian military generals or even some of their nuclear scientists, but it has rarely ever used a long-range ballistic missile to target the Iranian population directly. Iran, too, has preferred to use its proxies like Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis in Yemen to target Israel rather than go for a direct line of attack. Even after the recent killing of Hassan Nasrallah, which is a body blow to Iran, the message from Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who is Iran's supreme leader, was that Israel will pay a heavy price before he retreated into a secret hiding location. That indicates that Iran would not want to get into a direct confrontation with Israel. The last time there was a direct confrontation between both Tel Aviv and Tehran was back in April of this year when Iran fired hundreds of drones into mainland Israel. But it left very little impact. Much of those drones and missiles were intercepted by Israel's world-class air defense systems. Neither side wants a wider regional war. At least that's what they say on the record. Both Israel and Iran could be playing for time. Israel wants to force a conclusion to this war with the ability to neuter both Hamas and Hezbollah at the same time. Israel would want to achieve this sooner than later, and certainly before the November elections in the United States. For Iran, the opposite holds true. It's playing the waiting game, realizing that with time, the asymmetry of power between Israel and Iran will only flatten out in favor of Iran. The one big improbable in this game of cat and mice is how close is Iran to developing a nuclear weapon. If Iran were to cross the nuclear Rubicon, it changes the very dynamic of the region and beyond. In fact, on Monday, the Russian Prime Minister was in Tehran right after the momentous events of the weekend when Israel confirmed Nasrallah's death. There is widespread speculation that Russia is providing Tehran with nuclear know-how in exchange for Iranian-made drones and missiles which have been deployed in the Ukraine war front. If, hypothetically speaking, Iran were to cross the nuclear Rubicon, then Israel's security would be threatened not just in the immediate term, but in the long term. And that means all bets are off. The implications of Israel's ground invasion into Lebanon. Israel, of course, is calling this a limited operation, but can it be contained as a limited operation? And what are the fears that this could spread into a wider regional war? CNN's chief national security analyst and anchor Jim Shudo is now joining us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Jim, for speaking with us. So Israel is calling this a limited operation. Their objective is to try and secure the border between Israel and Lebanon in a way that the rocket attacks from Hezbollah stop. But can they do it in a limited operation?
I mean, that's the thing. Limited is in the eye of the beholder, I think you can say, because this is certainly less limited than it was prior in that they are now planning a significant, it seems, ground presence there. Listening to the IDF spokesperson speaking just in the last hour, he took pains, it seemed, to say, listen, we've done raids like this before. We go across, we go after firing positions, etc., and then we leave. He also said they do not plan a long-term occupation of southern Lebanon. That said, their stated goal remains to push Hezbollah back many miles from the border with Israel. The Litani River is often talked as the frontier. That's close to 20 miles back, and that was the frontier as required by the UN Security Council Resolution 1701. To do that, if that remains the goal, that requires pushing far further into southern Lebanon, a number of miles, of course, but also somehow clearing all those tunnels, all those firing positions, all those homes, etc., where the IDF says that Hezbollah forces have stored weapons and been firing inside into northern Israel. So I think Israeli officials being quite careful with their language right now, but when you listen to what the goal of this operation is, that speaks to a more significant operation.
But Jim, even if they were successful in that objective, which is to push Hezbollah back, whether it's 5, 10, 20 miles up north, Hezbollah still has the capability to fire long-range missiles into northern Israel, doesn't it?
Yeah. It does, and that's been one of the issues here, right, is that Hezbollah has built up an enormous arsenal with the aid of Iran of many tens of thousands of missiles, some of them with quite long ranges. And to be clear, Israel via airstrikes says it's been targeting some of those missile storage sites right up to in and around Beirut. Listen, they don't imagine, it seems, that they can reoccupy Lebanon going back to what we saw in the 80s and 90s here. So they want to create some sort of cushion that makes it safer, at least, for those living in northern Israel so that they could return to their homes. But there are, of course, certain missiles with certain ranges that moving 20 miles in would not solve the problem. And, of course, you have the track record here. Israeli forces went into Lebanon in 2006 for a month. And then withdrew, and Hezbollah came back. Israeli forces were in Lebanon from 1982 to 2000, and then they left, and Hezbollah grew. So the track record in terms of not just pushing Hezbollah back, but keeping them back, has not been great. And of course the question is, what are the lessons that have been learned? Can they apply those lessons?
Is it also possible that Israel, by doing what it's doing, the ground invasion, and of course, last weekend, the killing of Hassan Nasrallah, is also trying to draw Iran into this conflict? And what are the chances that Iran might bite that bait? We're not seeing any evidence to that effect, at least in the last few days. But how long can Iran hold out despite all of these moves from Israel?
Yeah. Listen, it's an open question. Iran, of course, launched a major attack on Israel in April, sending dozens of missiles and drones, though the vast majority of them were shot down not just by Israeli forces, but U.S. forces as well as other partners in the region. But since then, even with the killing of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran and the killing now of Nasrallah, it seems Iran is keeping its powder dry, as it were, to some frustration, it seems, from its allies Hamas and Hezbollah, making an assessment perhaps of what its own capabilities are. Can it strike Israel reliably and credibly? And what would the cost be? Would that then tempt an Israeli strike directly on Iran, particularly its nuclear facilities? Each player in this conflict right now is making judgments about what can be gained and what it might lose. And it seems, at least for the moment, Iran is calculating they might have more to lose by getting involved than by striking back.
And I want to get your thoughts on the U.S. administration, President Biden's White House. Every time they have said something vis-a-vis their expectation from Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu and his government have gone and done quite the opposite. Whether it was a ceasefire, whether it was attacking Lebanon, whether it is the ground invasion, it seems like, at least in public statements, the two don't seem to be on the same page.
And in private statements, frankly. I mean, the U.S. administration has made two major ceasefire efforts, one in Gaza and one in Lebanon prior to the strike killing Nasrallah on Friday. And in both instances, even from, while U.S. officials will say Hamas in one case, Hezbollah and other parties in the other case certainly had a role to play, but they expressed their frustration as well that the Israeli leader was not sufficiently committed to those efforts. So the fact of the matter is that at this point, it seems that the Israeli Prime Minister calculates he can do what he wants to some degree, despite disagreement with U.S. leaders.
And very quickly, what does this mean for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel? Of course, he's been under fire, whether it's on the rescue of the remaining hostages, whether it's on the killing of innocent civilians in Gaza, and of course now the invasion into Lebanon, the killing of Hassan Nasrallah. Has all of this sort of politically bought him some more time, strengthened his position domestically in Israel? I believe he's also inducted somebody who used to be a one-time political rival, is now part of his government.
Right. Well, when I was here in the wake of October 7th, there was a lot of talk in Israel as to how long Netanyahu could last. That talk is gone for now. It seems like he has, and some of this is reflected in the public polling, enough support now to continue. Not clear for how long, but many Israelis view, for instance, these most recent strikes against Hezbollah as successful, and there are political benefits, it seems, from that for the Israeli Prime Minister.
All right, Jim Shudo, live for us tonight in Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us with your thoughts and perspective. I also want to get the view from the other side. What's the view from the Arab world? What's the view from Lebanon? How are they viewing these proceedings? Because it's been pretty dramatic. Friday, you had the announcement from Israel about the killing of Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah. And then on Monday, leading up to Tuesday, you had news of the ground invasion by Israel. So Hussein Aibish is from the Arab Gulf States Institute. He's joining us live from Washington. Thank you very much, sir, for speaking with us. The IDF, before going into Lebanon, into southern Lebanon, has said that this is going to be a limited operation. They will try and destroy the Hezbollah capabilities in the border villages from where they've been launching these rocket and missile attacks into northern Israel, which of course has forced the resettlement of the northern populations, about 60,000 Israeli citizens. Do you think this objective can be achieved in the limited operation that the IDF has set out to do?
Well, no, because Hezbollah fires rockets from all over the place in Lebanon. They have the ability to hit any part of Israel whenever they want to from any part of Lebanon. It's really interesting, though, that Hezbollah has not used most of its arsenal, especially its really sophisticated arsenal of medium and long-range missiles that have precision guidance, because Iran has not wanted them to use it. And I think that Israel, really they can probably be successful in fighting anyone they encounter on the ground. But what are they going to do? Push the border 10 kilometers north? That doesn't change anything much. They could declare it a big success for northern Israel's security, but it won't make northern Israel any more secure. And I think Hezbollah would relish a protracted guerrilla war against the Israelis. So far, the fight between Israel and Hezbollah has been exactly the war that Israel wanted to fight and has been preparing to fight since 2006, since the last Hezbollah-Israeli war. But if they engage in a protracted occupation of even a small part of southern Lebanon, they will be engaging in the war that Hezbollah wants to fight. And it will be the opportunity for Hezbollah to rebuild and reconstitute itself. In other words, Israel would be preparing to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, if you follow.
No, so if you're saying that the Israeli objective, which is to push Hezbollah back 10 kilometers or 20 kilometers or however further north they want them to be pushed, let's presume that that's the objective. But you're saying that does not matter because Hezbollah still has the capability to hit Israel from even 100 kilometers away from the northern border. The question then is, why aren't they using those long-range missiles, particularly after what, if you were a Hezbollah operative or a Hezbollah cadre, you would imagine that this is the most catastrophic thing that can happen to you as an organization, which is the killing of your leader for the last 30 years, which is Hassan Nasrallah. So why haven't they used these long-range missiles?
Yeah, so this is an outstanding question, and it gets to the heart of what's going on and what's not going on in this war. Hezbollah's real missile arsenal has not been used at all during this campaign. And if it were an arsenal that was mainly intended to defend Hezbollah or Lebanon or anything like that, it would certainly have been. But that's not what it's for. It is for defending Iran. Hezbollah is not like Hamas or even the Houthis in Yemen a group with independence, a group that emerged independently of Iran and now is in an alliance or a marriage of convenience or something with the Iranians. Hezbollah was created in concert with Iran. It is, to a very large extent, a creature of Iran and of Iranian intelligence. And really, a lot of its most sophisticated capabilities, especially its missile arsenal, is not intended for any purpose other than, at the moment, its purpose anyway, is in this current era in the Middle East, it is intended to defend Iran and Iran's nuclear facilities from any Israeli or American attack. It is a crucial deterrent in Iran's forward defenses. It is not to be wasted in a war to protect Gaza or Hamas, and not even to protect Lebanon and Hezbollah. It is really only going to be used, in my estimation, if Iran is attacked or feels that it is about to be attacked. Now, there is the possibility that the arsenal gets so degraded and it passes a certain percentage of point of destruction, say 50% or something like that, of destruction, that Iran and Hezbollah conclude that it's a use it or lose it situation, that if they're ever going to use these things, now is the time, so why not? And the answer why not is that, of course, it would give Israel the excuse and the rationalization
the search for
I think what the Israelis are doing is implementing a strategy that they have long planned and held in abeyance. They have for a long time thought very seriously about what to do about the threat they face from Hezbollah, the constant rocket fire, the way in which Hezbollah has been able to drive out maybe 150,000 Israelis from their homes in northern Israel. And the plan was to do something like this, which was to begin with that lightning communication strike, the cell phones and pagers exploding, then artillery and aerial bombardment that would essentially try to destroy a whole bunch of the weapons caches and target mid-level leadership, and then go on and target the high-level leadership. But to complete the job, they do have to go in to get at those weapons caches. Hezbollah has its own network of tunnels, much like Hamas. They have to do all of that. So far, Israel was always deterred from doing this because of the fear of Hezbollah retaliation, Iranian retaliation, the retaliation of a kind of the axis of resistance that Iran had always talked about. But what they have done is they have pressed forward, taken the risk, and they have proved that that axis of resistance and Iran is more of a paper tiger. They faced a problem, which was they had Hezbollah raining rockets on them. They were trying to figure out what to do, and they took this calculated gamble that the Iranians were going to be, at the end of the day, more cautious, that the Houthis were going to be more cautious, that Hezbollah would not be able to quickly retaliate. And so far, that has proven right. I think what you're seeing is that Israel is the superpower militarily of the Middle East today. And it is able to strike at will in a way that it's very hard to retaliate. You raise, Aaron, the crucial issue. It's one thing to be able to get rid of bad guys. It's another to figure out what to do with the space, the land. That's what we discovered after Saddam Hussein, after Muammar Gaddafi, after the Taliban. It's what Israel is discovering in Gaza after they got rid of the initial ground invasion. So there you're right, and I would hope they understand that the best thing would be a quick mop-up operation and then withdraw back. But it's always very hard because once you break it, you buy it, as Colin Powell famously said about Iraq. So I had the Iranian president on before the Nasrallah attack and spent about an hour with him. We showed most of it on the show. He didn't strike me as a man who wanted to retaliate. He was talking about how Hezbollah has very limited options. It has very limited weaponry. Israel is so much more powerful. He talked about when I pressed him and said, so what would you do? He said, well, we have to convene a meeting of Islamic countries to condemn this. That doesn't sound like a man who is readying for a military strike. I think Iran is also on the ropes. They don't have as many options as you might think. And this president is trying to, in some way, find a way out, get some of these sanctions reduced. Now, the crucial question in Iran is always, does the president actually have power? Or are the Revolutionary Guard, the hardliners, the mullahs, do they have more power? Are they going to be more assertive? Is there some red line that hasn't been crossed yet that could trigger something? I doubt it, because Israel can counterpunch harder than any punch Iran can send it their way.
Viewers, today we are going to talk about a very, very critical issue. So please pay attention. This is extremely important. And therefore, I'm going to start at the very beginning. Before independence, the British created separate electorates for Muslims. Viewers, in every constituency, a Muslim was given the right to stand for elections, and only Muslims were allowed to vote for him or her. In these constituencies, viewers, as I told you, voting was intensely communal and along religious lines. And we all know that it lit the spark of separatism that eventually led to the partition of India. Has this highly dangerous two-nation mindset returned to guide Muslim voting behavior all these decades later? Just a few days ago, Samajwadi Party MLA called Mehboob Ali warned UP Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath that the rising population of Muslims will end his, quote, Hindu, unquote, rule. His words were ominous as they alluded to a dangerous strategy of weaponizing the minority vote to force regime change and drive a wedge in society. A similar sinister stratagem was devised in the run-up to the Lok Sabha elections this year by a Samajwadi Party leader who is also the niece of a senior Congress politician. Maria Alam called upon Muslims to wage, quote, vote jihad, unquote, to punish parties like the BJP, who in her words are Hindutvavadi. Not a single opposition party condemned her for using the words vote jihad. No one from the famed left ecosystem called her a communalist. No one from Lutyens' circle of privilege got up and said, look, don't play around with the secular ethos of our constitution. By all accounts, Alam's message had an impact, and bloc voting by minorities in UP cost BJP dearly, denying the saffron outfit a majority on its own. You know this, viewers. Now, amidst another round of assembly elections, the BJP fears that opposition fear-mongering among minorities in an attempt to weaponize them electorally could trigger what it calls, quote, vote jihad, unquote. The term that is highly controversial and polarizing has been used today by Maharashtra Deputy Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis. Even though a term like vote jihad should not be used, Fadnavis has used it, saying that in 14 out of 48 seats in Maharashtra, a quote, vote jihad, unquote, was waged upon the BJP in the 2024 Lok Sabha elections. This is what he said, viewers, and I quote him. Vote jihad was seen in 14 of the 48 Lok Sabha seats in Maharashtra. People from a particular community voted unitedly to defeat the Hindutvavadi candidates. The confidence of people from the other community has grown, and they have started believing that they can defeat Hindutvavadis even with fewer numbers. Some people feel that by organizing themselves they can bring down Hindutva, unquote. Fadnavis would almost have us believe that a sense of separatism has gripped the Muslim community all over again. The BJP senior leader has been hauled over the coals by the opposition that has accused him of trying to polarize Hindus against Muslims. Listen in, viewers.
जो भी सेकुलर लोग हैं, जो इस देश को संविधान को मानते हैं, जो गांधी जी के वसूलों पर डॉक्टर भीमराव के बताए हुए रास्ते पर चलते हैं, वो लोग बीजेपी को वोट नहीं दे रहे हैं, तो क्या मतलब? इसका मतलब वोट जिहाद हो गया ये? आपकी पार्टी का आदमी कहता है कि मस्जिद में घुस के मारूंगा, कुरान शरीफ पढ़ने नहीं दूंगा, और इस जो है मस्जिदों के सामने आकर के मस्जिद में रंग फेंकना और वहाँ ढोल बजाना, नमाज में डिस्टर्ब करना, उसके बाद आप ये उम्मीद करते हैं कि वो कम्युनिटी के लोग आपको वोट देंगे?
इसमें बोलता हूँ ना, बीजेपी सरकार अपने डेवलपमेंट विकास के मुद्दे पे पूरी तरह फेल हो चुकी है, विफल हो चुकी है। इसलिए महाराष्ट्र में चुनाव आ रहे, लोग उनसे सवाल कर रहे, लाड़की बहन योजना चालू किया, उसमें फेल हो गए। अब पब्लिक के अकाउंट में आ नहीं रहा है पैसा, क्या जवाब देंगे लोगों को? तो अभी आ गए अपने ओरिजिनल इस पे, अभी गाय आ गया, अभी दंगा, गंगा, मंदिर, मस्जिद, पाकिस्तान आ जाएगा, मंगलसूत्र आ जाएगा, ये तमाम चीज आ जाएगी अभी इनको, क्योंकि इनको पोलराइज करना है सिचुएशन को।
But while no one should use provocative and communally loaded terms like vote jihad, is there a concerted attempt by opposition parties to weaponize Muslims to undermine the secular foundation of democracy? Is the opposition using fear to get Muslims to vote along communal lines and thereby forcing religion into the electoral battlefield? Let's turn to the hard facts, viewers, because data is the most neutral arbiter. Data is not biased, And data allows us to sift fact from fiction. On this show, viewers, you get the fact. You don't get the fiction. If you want the fiction, go elsewhere, viewers. So let me begin. Hard fact 1. Muslims have overwhelmingly voted for India bloc in 2024 Lok Sabha polls as per the Lokniti CSDS poll survey. You can see the pictures. NDA got 10% of the Muslim votes while India bloc got 65%. In Uttar Pradesh, NDA got 2% Muslim votes while India bloc got 92% of the votes. Complete polarization, viewers. Karnataka, the NDA got 8% of the Muslim votes while India bloc got 92%. Bihar, 12% of the Muslim votes went to NDA, while India bloc got 87% votes. And in Bihar, you see a greater percentage because, viewers, the JDU